The NFC South, that's what we're talking about today. How did the NFL draft reshape those teams? And who's worth taking in your fantasy football drafts? Welcome to Shut Up Football. I'm Jeff Stoltzfus. That's Kevin. Join us as we, mostly me, attempt to do the impossible. Make sense of the Falcons' first-round pick. But before we do, let's make like a hurricane and hit Florida. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs invested in the trenches and brought mid-round value to the offense. Winners, Baker Mayfield, for getting maybe the best center in the draft and more pass-catching options. Losers, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. The Bucs are packing for a picnic that he is not invited to. In the second round, they took Chris Braswell, edge out of Alabama. He's 22 years old, 6'3", 251 pounds, and has great metrics. In college, he had 75 tackles, 10.5 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles. Most of that came in his final year. He didn't play much before that. He was viewed as a first-round talent. He's a solid tackler, very physical, and has a fast first step. The depth chart is Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. He's 25 years old. He's in the 4th year of his rookie deal. His 5th-year option was not exercised. He's been a bit of a disappointment for a first-round pick so far. Yaya Diaby, a 3rd-round selection from last year, he had a pretty good rookie year with 7.5 sacks. And Randy Gregory, 31 years old, he is new to the team. It looks like this is the last year for Joe Tryon, so I expect Braswell to compete for snaps early and be the eventual replacement next year. Braswell's got the talent and the pathway to playing time that you look for. He's a great investment for IDP format. In the 3rd round, they took Jalen McMillan, wide receiver, Washington. He's 22 years old, 6'1", 197 pounds, runs a 4.47. He's got good burst and agility. He's got an RAS of 8.67. He had 2,100 yards receiving in college, 17 touchdowns. He was very productive. He's a big slot receiver. The depth chart is Mike Evans, who's 30 years old, just signed a 2-year deal for a ton of money, still playing elite. Chris Godwin, 28 years old, coming off a down year in terms of receptions, but he still had 1,000 yards receiving. Part of that is because he was playing out of the slot only about 1/3 of the time, compared to previous years where he was playing out of the slot more than half the time. The new OC said they're moving Godwin back to the slot the majority of the time. He's in the last year of his current deal. Trey Palmer was a 6th-round pick from last year, but I do think he's better than his draft capital. There's also Devin Tompkins and Rockham Jarrett. It looks like they're preparing for life after Chris Godwin. They just paid Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans a ton of money, so I don't think it's a question of do they want Godwin to stay, it's just can they afford to keep him around. As for McMillan, I think for his rookie year, he won't see much work outside special teams, but potentially next year, he could be the new slot receiver here. Jalen McMillan's ADP is about 34th overall in standard 12-team leagues, around teammate Bucky Irving and between receivers Luke McCaffrey and Malik Washington. There's plenty of upside with McMillan, but the downside could be 1 year until fantasy relevance and 2 years with Baker Mayfield, followed by possibly a rookie quarterback. In the 4th round, they took Bucky Irving, running back out of Oregon. He's 21 years old, 5'9", 192 pounds, he runs a 4.55. In college, he had nearly 3,000 rushing yards and over 700 yards receiving, 25 total touchdowns. He's got great tape. He plays bigger than his size and looks faster than his 40 time. He's got good vision and he makes defenders miss, forces them to take bad angles. Daniel Jeremiah comped him to Devin Singletary. He doesn't have the ideal size to be an RB1 or the elite speed that others have of a similar size, like Jaguars' Keelan Robinson. The depth chart is Rachaad White. He's 25 years old. He's got 2 years left on his rookie deal. He's been okay so far, but hasn't broken 1,000 yards. But he did see 70 targets last year. Good for fantasy. Chase Edmonds is 28 years old. He's on the final year of his deal. And Sean Tucker, who's a 22-year-old UDFA from last year. I'd expect some level of involvement for Bucky Irving in his rookie year. Maybe he can suck up some of those targets that Rachaad White was getting. He could be the new 3rd down back here. The concern I have with him for fantasy is he could hurt White's value while also not possessing standalone value of his own. Bucky Irving is being mocked 33rd overall, between running backs Kamani Vidal and Audric Estime. New Orleans Saints. The Saints made a big splash, but don't forget to flush. Winners, weird-ass names. Losers, Jake Haener. In the 2nd round, they took Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback out of Alabama. Some thought that he could be drafted in the 1st round, but at least he beat his brother, Country Time Lemonade McKinstry. Kool-Aid is 21 years old, 6 foot, 200 pounds. In college, he had 93 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2 interceptions. He's a decent side, an okay speed. He can play multiple coverages. He breaks through walls and screams, "Oh yeah!" His tape didn't wow me. A lot of it was badly thrown balls, receiver drops, or luck where McKinstry seemed to get all the praise. The depth chart is Paulson Adebo. He's 24 years old. He's on the last year of his deal. Marshawn Lattimore. He's 27 years old. He has 3 more years left. However, there is an out after this season, but not without serious dead cap money. This is a weird one because it's Adebo who's at the end of his contract, but it might actually be Marshawn Lattimore who's on the way out. According to the socials, Lattimore is unhappy and wants to be traded. So Kool-Aid seems destined to become a starter here eventually, one way or the other. But I'm not interested. I like Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, and Nate Wiggins miles above Kool-Aid McKinstry. So if I need a cornerback in this draft, I'm pulling the trigger on one of those. In the 5th round, they took Spencer Rattler, quarterback out of South Carolina. He's 23 years old, 6 foot, 200 pounds. In college, he threw for over 10,000 yards, which is impressive, but it was over 5 years at 2 different colleges. At one point, he was a Heisman candidate. At Oklahoma, he was benched for Caleb Williams and transferred to South Carolina. Some said he slipped in the draft because of a reality show he was on 4 years ago. Counterpoint, maybe they just didn't like him. The depth chart is Derek Carr. He's 33 years old. He's got 3 years left on his contract. Jake Haener, 25 years old. He was a 4th round pick from last year. And Taysom Hill, who's always ready to steal fantasy points no matter who the quarterback is. I'm not a Rattler hater. I just don't believe in him. It's fine. I don't believe in Santa either. Come at me, bro. I'm sure he'll beat out Jake Haener for the backup gig here. I was never really that high on Haener anyway. But there's no reason to expect anything from Rattler in his rookie deal or anytime soon. Spencer Rattler was mocked about 44th overall in standard 12-team leagues, slightly higher in Superflex. I'm not interested in Rattler. If I need a quarterback, I'm shooting for Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. There are things to like about Rattler's tape, but overall, I don't like it. I think he's another Desmond Ridder, Davis Mills, Sam Howell, take your pick. He's good, but he's not good enough. And even if I did like his tape, he's 23 years old. He's got low draft capital invested in him. He's stuck behind Derek Carr for 2 to 3 years. Dennis Allen is on the hot seat. If a new coach comes in, he'll have zero allegiance to Rattler. He'll just know him as not my guy. I'm not into bold takes, but for Dynasty, I think he's a wasted pick. In the 5th round, they took Bub Means, wide receiver out of Pittsburgh. He's 23 years old, 6'1", 212 pounds, runs a 4.43. Most of his metrics are pretty impressive. He's got an RAS of 9.35. However, I'm not sure I see all that speed on the field. He loses some of his speed when transitioning. I don't see much separation. However, he's good at fighting for the ball. In college, he had 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. The depth chart is Chris Olave, who's 24 years old, Rashid Shaheed, who's 25 years old, he was a UDFA a year ago, and A.T. Perry, 24 years old, he was a 6th round pick last year. There's also Cedric Wilson Jr., who's 28 years old, he's on a 2-year deal for cheap, and Equanimous St. Brown. I don't think there are any expectations for Bub Means in his rookie year. But I kinda like him. I think there's room in this depth chart for another role after Olave, after Shaheed, that Bub Means could fill in his rookie year. Now, the problem is, if he doesn't do it in his rookie year, he might just get jumped on the depth chart next year by another rookie or a free agent. Luckily for you, you can take the risk for cheap. Bub Means' ADP is mocked about 70th overall, near Ryan Flournoy and in front of a few other deep receivers that I like. Falcons, oh Falcons. Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons had a draft that will be referenced for a long time. Winners, NFL pundits. The Falcons' 1st round surprise filled a week's worth of network rundowns. Losers, Taylor Heineke, who took a pay cut to stay with the Falcons, only to watch Kirk Cousins get paid $180 million and a rookie get his parking spot. In the 1st round, they took Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington. What were the Falcons thinking? First, they tampered with Kirk Cousins, now they tampered with themselves? Let me try and break this down like maybe the Falcons were thinking. First of all, it's not that crazy. There is precedent. Jordan Love was taken in the first round, Jalen Hurts was taken in the second round, Kirk Cousins himself was drafted in the same exact draft as Robert Griffin III, and then he actually outlived him there in Washington. They all became successful starters. Meanwhile, there are other quarterbacks who were drafted early that did not become successful starters and had to play right away. Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold. Kirk Cousins is going to be 36 when the season starts, and he is coming back from a serious injury. Now, the Falcons, I think that they're only one quarterback away from competing this year. You know who else thought that last year? The Jets. And what happened to that? I think they're learning from the Aaron Rodgers situation with the Jets, and they think they're only one quarterback away. Great, they got two. So maybe it's the Falcons that are really the ones that are all in. Michael Penix Jr. is 24 years old, which seems old for a rookie and for a guy who's expected to sit his rookie year. But he was in college for long enough to become a surgeon. Over 6 years, he threw for 13,700 yards and 96 touchdowns. God damn. Penix wasn't my favorite quarterback in this draft, but there is a lot to like here. He's got a big arm, he's mobile, he's got the ideal size and speed for the modern NFL. So Kirk Cousins is signed on a 4-year deal for $180 million. $100 million of which is guaranteed. And this is the real problem I think people have with the Falcons drafting Michael Penix Jr. It's not about the pick itself, it's the sheer amount of money Cousins got. If you forget the money, this pick kinda makes sense. This is the one time I don't think the money is indicative of the situation here. The only thing that is 100% guaranteed is Kirk Cousins is gonna get paid by the Falcons. I've never been a Kirk Cousins hater, but I actually feel like he's been pooped on a little too much in his career. He's actually a good quarterback. But 4 years of starting with the Falcons? I'll believe it when I see it. Michael Penix Jr.'s ADP is 34th overall. Drafting Penix isn't about talent. It's about roster construction. If your team is strong enough that you can stash Penix as a third QB, he's 100% worth it. If you have aging vets like Aaron Rodgers, or you have Kirk Cousins himself, he's a good get for your dynasty team. Which means he's not a pick for everybody, and likely, the rich get richer. You might have to stash him for 2 years, but you also might get 10 years out of him starting. In the third round, they took Bralen Trice, linebacker out of Washington. He's 23 years old, 6'4", 245 pounds. In college, he had 101 tackles and 18 sacks. He's big, he's powerful. He's not super explosive, but he's solid all around. The depth chart is Arnold Ebiketie, he's 25 years old. Lorenzo Carter, he's 28 years old. Adaya Gundashi, he's 25 years old. They are all in the final year of their current deals. Trice probably won't get much playing time in his rookie year outside of special teams. There's a good path to being a starter next year, but they're also likely to add more to this group next year. Trice is a good solid player, but I'm just not sold on him for fantasy. In the 6th round, they took Casey Washington, wide receiver out of Illinois. He's 23 years old, 6'1", 200 pounds. In college, he had 1,500 yards, 4 touchdowns. Over 5 years. He's got good size and burst, but his long speed is unimpressive. The depth chart is Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Kaderil Hodge, and Ray McLeod. Outside of this receiving core, Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts are likely to soak up a lot of targets. Which means, even if Parker Washington were to pass Kaderil Hodge and Ray McLeod on this depth chart, he'd still be like 6th at best in team targets. Plus, next year, they could bring in better competition. I like the player more than I like the opportunity. There's a reason he's not mocked in the top 100. You can pluck him off your waiver wire after the draft. Carolina Panthers. The Panthers drafted like a team with a plan, and that plan was drafting every time David Tepper left to pee. Winners. Bryce Young. If he falls flat again, it won't be for a lack of weapons. Losers. Terrace Marshall Jr., Jonathan Mingo, and Tommy Tremble. In the 1st round, they took Xavier Legette, wide receiver out of South Carolina. He's 23 years old, 6'1", 221 pounds, runs a 4.39. He's crazy athletic with an RAS of 9.9. In college, he had over 1,600 yards and 12 touchdowns, most of which came last year, which is usually concerning, but he had some serious life stuff to deal with early on. He was one of my pre-draft favorites. The Panthers traded up one spot to get into the butt of the 1st round and take Legette over Keon Coleman. They had a clear preference. A scouting director compared him to Anquan Bolden, though he runs much faster. The depth chart is Deontay Johnson, who's 27 years old. He's new to the Panthers, traded over the offseason. He's a free agent after this season. Adam Thielen, he's 33 years old. He's got 2 years left on his deal, but there is an out after this season. Jonathan Mingo was a second-round pick from last year. Terrace Marshall Jr. is 23 years old. He's in the final year of his rookie deal. I think it's time for Marshall Stans to throw in the towel. Amir Smith-Marset and Jalen Coker, who was an undrafted free agent of note. Now there is a ton of athletic upside for Legette and a ton of risk, but not just for him, for Bryce Young too. Now Legette will be involved in his rookie year. As for Jonathan Mingo, he has potential, but the new coaching staff immediately traded for Deontay Johnson and then drafted Xavier Legette. And maybe that says something about how they view Mingo. Next year, Johnson and Thielen might be gone, who knows? There is potential for Legette to become a wide receiver 1 here. Xavier Legette's ADP is 14th overall. You'd be choosing between Ricky Pearsall and Adonai Mitchell. In the second round, they took Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas. He's 20 years old. He didn't test at the combine because he was recovering from a torn ACL he suffered in November. In college, he had 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns. I thought he was the best back in the draft. I guess the Panthers did too because they traded up to get him. The running back room is Chuba Hubbard, who's 24 years old. He's in the final year of his rookie deal. My guess is he'll move on after this season. Miles Sanders, who's 27 years old. He's got 3 years left on his deal, with an out after this season. Rashad Penny, who's new to the team, and Raheem Blackshear, who's got a 1-year deal. I expect Jonathan Brooks to be the starting running back here in 2025. Look, he's coming back from a torn ACL. That's a big deal. It takes a lot of time to recover and even more time to get back to your full form. So I don't expect a lot from Brooks in his rookie season. In fact, I don't expect much at all. If you're drafting him with the expectation that he's going to be your league winner in year 1, you're going to be disappointed. I expect a committee this year, probably led by Hubbard. Jonathan Brooks is being mocked 8th overall. I would absolutely grab him. But if you need a running back to play this year, either make a trade or grab a scat back with some upside later in your draft. In the third round, they took Trevin Wallace. That's Trevin. Linebacker. He's 21 years old, he's got good size, and he's stupid fast. He's got an RAS of 9.34. In college, he had 166 tackles, 10 sacks, and 3 interceptions. He was the third off-the-ball linebacker taken in this draft. He's explosive. He's been comped to Bobby Okereke. The depth chart is Shaq Thompson. He's 30 years old, he's on the final year of his deal. Josie Jewell. He's 29 years old. He's got a 3-year deal, but an out after 2025. Wallace probably won't do much of anything more than mix in with Thompson and Jewell this year. But he could be on the path to a starting gig next year. So he's absolutely somebody you should be grabbing in IDP. In the fourth round, they took Jatavian Sanders, tight end out of Texas. He's 21 years old, 6'4" when he's wearing thick socks, and 245 pounds. In college, he had nearly 1,300 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. He's a good receiving tight end. He's been comped to Isaiah Likely and Luke Musgrave. The depth chart is Tommy Tremble, who's 23 years old. This is the last year of his rookie deal, and Ian Thomas. I like Sanders, but I don't trust rookie tight ends, especially ones that don't block so well. He'll be on the field some as a rookie, but probably nothing you can trust for fantasy. Likely, he'll take over next year, whether Tommy Tremble leaves or not. Jatavian Sanders is being mocked 32nd overall, around Kamani Vidal and Bucky Irving. If you need a tight end this year, you're gonna have to go after Brock Bowers. If you can afford to slow roll it, Sanders is fine, but so are later options like Cade Stover. And that's the NFC South. We're almost done here. The West is next. Thanks for watching Shut Up Football. We'll see you in the next one. Say hi to your mom for me. Peace!
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. It sound right, boy.
Oh yeah!